Good evening, friends. Welcome to another episode of Life with God. This evening, we have a special guest coming from Andrews University. His name is Thomas Shepard, Dr. Thomas Shepard, and he's a research professor of New Testament interpretation. Welcome, Dr. Shepard. So glad you could join us this evening.
Good to be with you.
Also, part of the group discussion tonight, we have Mark, Nicola, and Kian joining us. Thank you for being here, guys. And tonight we will continue the discussion on God is love in the New Testament. If you have been following this series, for the last 3 episodes, we have discussed God is love in the Bible. We looked first with Dr. Rahel Wells and then with Dr. Lael Caesar on in the Old Testament, studying God is love in the Old Testament. And last time, we also had a conversation with Dr. Felix Cortez about God's love in the New Testament. And so we continue this discussion. Tonight, we have a slightly new approach. For the past 3 episodes, we have tried to take more of a big perspective look. So we studied different passages of the Bible, how they connect together, how they portray God as love. We looked at patterns in Scripture. We looked at the story of salvation, if you want, from Genesis to Revelation. So these 3 speakers really took us to different places in the Bible to point to different aspects of God as love. Tonight, our approach will be slightly different. And I'm really excited about that. So we're going to pick up a magnifying glass and go into the detail of the text. And Dr. Shepard is someone who has been instrumental in my personal experience of learning how to read the Bible. I have taken several classes with him, but the class that really stood out and really helped me tremendously in my reading of the Bible was a class on narrative analysis. And really, since then, that was a few years ago, and since then, I have been studying the Bible much more in depth. And the special value that this method has for me personally is because I'm not a biblical scholar, so I do not have expertise in the languages of the Bible, is that I can read the Bible in English and look at these narrative details, the literary aspect of Scripture, and get so much out of it that I wasn't able to understand before. So I know time will be very short tonight, but I'm thrilled with having Dr. Shepard tonight to show some of the value and the beauty of the text, and how we can find God is love in the details as well as in the big picture. So before we go into the conversation, I also just wanted to take a moment to thank so much to all of our viewers. This week, I spent a little bit of time looking through some of the Facebook posts that we have shared over the past 2-3 weeks, and I was curious to see where some of you are from. And so I kind of brushed up a little bit of my geography, and I made a list of some of the countries from where you have been watching and interacting with us. I specifically looked at some of the profiles of those who have interacted with us. And so I wanted to, first of all, a big shout out, a big thank you for watching, for sharing your feedback with us. And so I want us to go through a different kind of round than we're used to before we get to know Dr. Shepard, and mention some of these countries. So I'm going to need a little bit help here, and let's see how many of these countries we can cover here. Okay, so we had people from Jordan, Mexico, Colombia, Venezuela, Chile, Romania, Pakistan, Philippines, Nigeria, Nepal, Peru, Brazil,
Myanmar, Indonesia, Canada, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Tajikistan, South Africa, Bolivia, the Ukraine, Kenya, Sudan, Bangladesh, Ecuador, Malaysia, Mongolia, Afghanistan, East Timor, Argentina, Albania, Norway, Moldova, Egypt, India, the United Kingdom, Angola,
China, Guatemala, Suriname, Nicaragua, Belize, Turkey, Denmark, Guyana, Tanzania, Sierra Leone, Guinea-Bissau, and Haiti.
Sudan, Sao Tome and Principe, Ghana, Madagascar, Uganda, Burundi, Jamaica, Mozambique, Benin, France, Congo, Rwanda, Spain, and Ethiopia.
And then we had quite a few states as well. So Tennessee, Texas, Nebraska, New York, Ohio, California, Virginia, Illinois, Florida, Arizona, and others. I'm sure we didn't catch all of them, but it was so exciting for us to see the interconnectedness of the world and the way we can be together, even though we're so far apart. Honestly, after looking through all these countries, and sometimes, I even did a little bit of research to brush up on my memory of where people are located and where countries are located. And I wanted to get on a road trip. I wanted to get on a road trip and visit some of these beautiful places. One of the things that I noticed is that many of our viewers are young adults, students, a lot of them students. And so I'm really thankful for that because, for me, every generation has a unique role in the society, but young adults are our future. And so I'm really excited about the opportunity to serve you with the program that we're offering. And I'm also glad to see that you are appreciating what we're doing. So I'm going to take a moment to thank Adventist Theological Society for the sponsorship of this program. We are offering you these episodes for free. So you do not have to pay anything. You don't have to register. It's simply online for you to watch at your convenience. And this is offered to you freely based on the generosity of the society and also the generosity of our guests who come here voluntarily to share their expertise with you. So I'm really thankful for you. We appreciate your presence. I'm inviting you to share, continue to be part of this conversation and continue to share that with your family and friends, because it's extremely important for us to learn who God is and in the process understand better how we can love better. So thank you for being here. As usual, you are welcome to ask questions in YouTube. And if you are not able to, I know some of you have mentioned that you have a hard time interacting with us because you need to log in to have an account or something like that. So I believe you should have a link on Facebook as well. So even if you are watching on YouTube, which is where we post our live videos, you can go on Facebook and ask your comments, ask your questions there under the link of the live stream. And we will be monitoring that and bring those into the conversation tonight. So as always, we welcome your participation as well. Now I would like to get to know the guest a little bit. So Dr. Shepherd, let's see how much we can discover about you in 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. Tom Shepherd. I grew up in.
I'm sorry. We're going to be asking a round of questions.
Okay.
Sorry about the hesitation there. So we'll be asking you a lot of questions, and we want to see how many we get to know to answer in 5 minutes. I'm going to time us with this. Okay, here we go. If you could go on a world tour to visit only one kind of museum, what museum would you choose? What kind of museum?
A history museum.
Since you started answering it, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Southern California, Los Angeles area.
Who is your favorite composer?
It's a tough. Maybe Beethoven, Bach. Beethoven, Mendelssohn. I'm a cellist, so I like to play.
What was your favorite undergraduate class?
Favorite undergraduate class? Probably Greek.
What is the most interesting thing you've seen through the telescope?
M82, which is a messier object in up in the Big Dipper. It's just I took a picture of it, and I want to take some more pictures of it.
I'd love to see those pictures. What's something new that you learned recently?
Oh, let's see. What have I been? I've been reading a biography about Benjamin Rush, who was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, and I'm right now reading about his experience as a medical doctor in during the Revolutionary War. And medicine and war were very different in those days than they are today.
One thing that you like to do it again.
Oh, go to Australia.
If you had to pick one, which one do you enjoy more, reading or writing?
Probably writing.
What is the favorite thing to bake?
Bread.
Favorite book that's not the Bible?
The Desire of Ages by Ellen White. Great book.
What is your favorite Bible character?
Hmm. That's a good question. Maybe Ruth. It's a great story.
Now, I wrote this question before I saw you today, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Your personal preference, tie or bow tie?
It's very easy. It's a bow tie.
Always.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
What is some?
Oh, let's see. How long I've been wearing them?
Hmm.
20 years, maybe more.
What is something you have experienced that you never imagined you would?
Oh, something I experienced that I never imagined I would. Well, I did get to climb to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro.
Oh.
Hmm.
Very, very tired up there.
What was your educational journey? Where did you get your degrees?
Well, I did undergraduate at Pacific Union College in Northern California, did a doctor of public health at Loma Linda, did a PhD at Andrews University. And the public health came before the PhD, but the PhD came after we were missionaries in Africa and came back to be to learn how to be a teacher.
What is your favorite food?
Favorite food? Probably beans that I eat at breakfast.
Is there a song or a hymn that's been especially meaningful to you recently?
Well, I've just been able to form a string quartet again. I've had that over time, and tomorrow we have our practice, and I'm taking them this beautiful arrangement of Amazing Grace. I have to say, it's a wonderful song.
What is one thing that you wanted to do on the new Earth that you will likely not get to do here?
Travel to other galaxies.
You mentioned beans, so I'm just curious. Do you like baked beans or not?
Yeah, they're okay. They're okay. Since I'm pre-diabetic, better not eat too many. Like carbohydrates too much already.
Where would you spend your money if you get a spare of $1,000?
Buy some things for my telescope.
I'm going to follow up with the last question I did. Is there an instrument that you play?
I'm a cellist.
A cellist. Okay.
Mhm.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dr. Shepard.
That was fun.
That was fun. We learned quite a few things about you. And maybe you could also tell us, are you posting those photos from your telescope anyway? I can see them on Facebook, but I don't know.
Yeah, they're on Facebook. I don't have like another site that I've put them, but
Okay. So
taking some and putting them up on Facebook.
we need to become friends with you so we can see them. They're pretty awesome.
Oh, yeah.
They're pretty awesome.
You're welcome.
Okay, so let's delve into the topic for tonight. Again, we're going to take a new angle looking at the details of the text. And so here's the opening question on the topic of God as love in the New Testament. How can we find God's love in the details of the New Testament?
Okay. I mean, I suppose we all speak at different things, but there are two authors of the New Testament that speak about love more than anybody else. Those are John and Paul. And they have more uses of the verbs for love and the noun for love than anyone else. So those are good places to look.
Is any passage in particular that you would suggest that we look at in these authors?
Well, yeah, the one that everybody thinks of in terms of love and what it means is in 1 Corinthians 13, which comes in a very interesting section of this book. 1 Corinthians was the Corinthian church was a church that had trouble with the Apostle Paul. They didn't always trust him, and he had a little challenging experience with them. And his first book, he talks about a number of topics. They were a very troubled church. And one of the things he discusses is spiritual gifts. And they seem to have been really big on speaking in tongues and prophecy. And so he talks to them about that. And in the midst of that discussion, they seem to be people who, what should I say, they felt that there were certain gifts that were more important of the Spirit. And so he describes these things and talks about them. And just before he gets to talking about love, he asks, is everybody an apostle? Is everybody a prophet? Is everybody a teacher? Does everybody have gifts of healing and speak in tongues and everything? And the way the Greek is written, the expected answer for that, each of those questions is no. So he gets to the end of his series of questions, and then he says, I'll show you a still more excellent way. And that's when he starts to talk about love in chapter 13. I see I'm not striking any fire here with questions.
No. So I can ask a question, kind of.
Well, it doesn't have to be questions. We could just have a discussion, but I think we should read next too.
No,
Go ahead.
Because I'm thinking back to last week and some of the things that we were talking about last week, and tying in specifically 1 Corinthians 13. I mean, it's beautiful. It talks about love is patient. It doesn't keep a record of wrong. It's kind, and like all these beautiful things that it says about it. And I'm wondering if there is a story, and I especially like maybe from like one of the Gospels, where these characteristics are actually shown in the story. And, my personal question would be like, we look at the cross and we always talk about the cross being the height of God's love, but the cross is also a pretty sticky story, I'd say, because you've got torture and you've got death. And then you have people talk about like the justice of God and the wrath of God. And I'm like, where's the no record of wrongs and the long suffering and the patience when you're dealing with the wrath of God? So I'm wondering how we can weave that in with the story of the cross.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So first, that's a great question and a good comment. As I think about what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 13, as he defines love, first the passage falls into like three sections: the absence of love, the definition of love, and the supremacy of love. So the definition is what everybody tends to focus on, which is verses 4 through 7. And the part of the problem is that in English, it all comes across as very many adjectives. Love is patient, love is kind, love is not rude, it's not arrogant, and so forth. When actually in Greek, they're all verbs. So it's actually might be better to say love acts patiently, love acts kindly, love acts without envy, love does not act arrogantly, does not act rudely. And if you think about those actions, now if you want to talk about, where is this seen at the cross, the place that I think illustrates this quite well, I mean, you can look at all the stories of the cross, but the stories of the cross are displaying the cross with a lot of them without a lot of commentary. Mm-hmm. If you want kind of commentary on the cross, how does love express there? I think 1 Peter 2 is actually the place to go.
Okay.
We could talk about it in the narrative of the cross, but it is kind of a narrative in 1 Peter 2. So if you kind of turn over there, it's in verses, looking here, verses 21 through 25. All right. So maybe we should read the text and then we can talk about that. And if you want, we can go and look at a thing of the cross. I do have another story in the Gospels that I was thinking of going to tonight that I think does show love. So okay, whatever you guys want to do.
Yeah, well, let's read this one and see how you can help us understand, the aspect of love in the story. Maybe you said 1 Peter 2 verses 22 to 25.
21. 21 to 25.
Okay. Should
we read it? Can I read it, or should I go ahead and read it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. 21. For to this you are called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that you should follow his steps. Who committed no sin, nor was deceit found in his mouth. Who, when he was reviled, did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but committed himself to him who judges righteously, who himself bore our sins in his own body on the tree, that we, having died to sins, might live for righteousness. By those stripes you were healed. For you are like sheep going astray, but have now returned to the shepherd and overseer of your souls.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you think about, I suppose, Nick, it kind of depends. Do you like to go by Nick or Nicholas?
Whichever you want.
Well, which do you prefer?
I really don't have a preference.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm thinking in terms of, when we think of love, I mean, it's such a multifaceted word. I mean, you can say you love a certain kind of music. You can say you love pizza, you love your dog, you love your girlfriend, you love your mother and father. And those are all kinds of different ways of thinking of it. We tend to think of love in Western culture in terms of romance. I think a lot is where the way the media pushes it, where the biblical sense of love is really more of a commitment to other people and acting to support them and to bless them and to help them, and an other-centeredness. And that's what I see in this text. This other-centeredness. The amazing thing that I see here is it's like, he doesn't get angry. He doesn't retaliate when they're beating him, and you're like, how does this guy do this? And the key to it is he kept on entrusting himself to the one who judges justly. I mean, he handed himself over to God. And so when they were beating him, now, I mean, I suppose you could say that doesn't show love. It certainly shows a forbearance. And then Peter takes and applies it and says, this is how our lives are healed, is by his death.
Well, based on the what you mentioned earlier about the fact that love is more of a commitment, I can see love in Jesus, in the fact that he did not retaliate, like you said. He did not revile. He did not. He just suffered, in the sense of carrying through his commitment to the end. Because at any point he could have paused, he could have stopped, he could have turned around, but he was committed to this and he went through with it.
Yeah, there is this pretty picture I will point to in John chapter, let's see, is it 19 or 21? It's John 19. John 19, yes. It's a very touching picture. I'm just teaching the Gospel of John right now, and the Gospel of John is fascinating for the way it tells stories. It focuses in on just two people. So it's Jesus and Nathaniel, and it's Jesus and Nicodemus, and Jesus and the woman at the well, and Jesus at the man at the pool of Bethesda, and Jesus and the man who was born blind, and on and on and on it goes. And when you get to the cross, there's a number of these. But the very touching was in John 19, verses 26 and 27. And if you wanted to know about an expression of love, I think it's right here. It says, when Jesus saw his mother, now he's on the cross. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her to his own home. You can imagine how tragically sorrowful it was for the mother of Jesus to watch him die. And he had nothing to give her. He was powerless. He was possibly naked, or just a loincloth. They were dividing up his clothes. He had nothing to give her. But what he gave her was the person who loved him, which was the Apostle John. And he just said these words. It was hard to breathe when you were on the cross. He has a very short little sentence. And John immediately understood what he meant. Please take care of my mother. I think that's a great expression of love.
So my question is, by reading the First Peter 2, and also just your example as well, you said that a lot of part of love is commitment, and like you don't get angry when you're suffering or anything else. But is it more like habitual or spiritual? Like, I don't know how should I say this. Like, I can endure and I can like stop my anger and just like keep it inside and like say it's a love and like I'm practicing, but like it's just hard to even in First Corinthians, right? It's that it's a spiritual gift, but like what if I'm not gifted?
Well, actually, back to 1 Corinthians 13, the Apostle Paul says that that this is the supreme gift, and that if you this is the one gift, I guess I would say, that God wants to give to each one of us. It's the gift of love. He says, not everybody speaks in tongues, not everybody heals, not everybody teaches, not everybody's an apostle, but everybody can have love. And he says, if we don't have love, then we're like this clanging cymbal, or it's a lack of spiritual power. But that's not exactly your question. Your question is, so where do I get it if I don't feel it now? And I think first thing is that love is not a feeling. I mean, sure, there's loving feelings, and there's romance and different things like that. But deep down, the kind of love that the Bible is talking about is a principle of action. It is a choice rooted in a change that God makes in my life. So first, he has to come in. I have to open my heart to him. He has to come in, and then that love can flow out to other people. But it's like, I one time was talking to an old man at a gym. I like to lift weights back before COVID days, it's a lousy pandemic. And I remember there was this old man, and he told me, he said he and his wife would come to the gym, and I would say, how long have you been married? And he said, 50 years. I said, wow, that's impressive. He says, I didn't say it was easy. He had the commitment that stuck to it, and he was able to continue that experience. I think he was joking a bit, but when you've lived with somebody, I've been married for 46 years now, and when you live for somebody that long, it's just, there's a special bond which is linked into your history, your knowledge of each other and of the experiences you've been through. I think we should go to the other passage, Adelina.
I'm curious. Let's go.
It's Luke 15. It's the story of the prodigal son. And now Luke doesn't use the word love in this passage. When I teach narrative analysis to people, I say characterization, how do you know what a character is like, is expressed in two different ways. It's expressed by telling and by showing. And telling is when the narrator or the author gives you the word. They'll say he was a patient man, say, and that's by telling. You actually have the adjective or the noun that's described there. Showing is the other way, which is much more common in biblical stories, and that is it's not told. You're not told that he's a loving person. It's the actions that show you that. So this comes out a lot in this story of the prodigal son. And I know it's a little bit of a long story, but I always like to read the text. So, I mean, I don't know, could we read the text? Emily?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Who's going to read?
Do you want us to split it up a little bit? I mean, there's enough here that we could all get in on the action.
I like it.
All right. I can start and I'll read a few verses.
Mm-hmm.
Then Jesus said, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the property that'll belong to me. So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout the country, and he began to be in need.
Then he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his field to feed swine. And he would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, How many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.
And he arose and came to his father. But when he was still a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight, and am no longer worthy to be called your son.
But the father said to his servants, Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. And bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead, and is alive again. He was lost and is found. They began to celebrate.
Now his older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, Your brother has come, and because he has received him safe and sound, your father has killed the fatted calf. But he was angry and would not go in. Therefore his father came out and pleaded with him.
But he answered his father, Listen, for all these years I have been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours come back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him. Then the father said to him, Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice. Because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found.
It's a great story. It's a classic story. And of course, it comes in 3 scenes. And each scene focuses on one of the characters. First scene focuses on the young man. Second scene focuses on the father. The third scene focuses on the older son. So the question I have is, when you look at this first scene, what picture do you get of this guy? What's his younger son like?
I mean, he seems to me to be very self-absorbed. Because to say, hey, give me my half of the property is to say, I wish you were dead. Can I have what would be in the will and testament now? I mean, to want that money and property and everything so much that you're basically saying to your dad, yeah, I kind of wish you were dead. That'd be worth more to me than being alive and with you.
Yeah,
that to me shows a high degree of being self-absorbed.
Yeah, that's pretty harsh.
Well, he's also not a good manager of what he receives. I mean, he spends it very quickly, and then when life throws difficulties, he cannot cope with it.
Yeah, it's interesting. You hear in his story, you hear his words at the beginning, and you hear his words at the end. But in between, he falls like a meteor, just bam, and hits the earth. And so it's all told in rapid succession. We call it summary. It's boom, 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 boom. All the verbs just, he just falls down and bumps up against the gates of hell when he's ends up in this pig pen. I mean, the worst place for a Jewish boy to be is feeding pigs. Not only feeding pigs, but wanting to eat what pigs eat, and nobody even gives him that. it has nothing. It's like, man, this boy has really shot himself in the foot.
It's
And-
crazy to me that his dad was willing to give him the property anyway. I mean, if he
Yeah.
had, if he had these tendencies coming out and everything, yeah, I could definitely see like more of a tough love thing. Are you kidding? You're not mature enough to handle that kind of money. But like, I don't know. It's just it's surprising to me. It's unexpected that the dad actually listens.
Yeah, and that the dad doesn't remonstrate with him at all. And so our narrator has diminished that aspect, which you and I might, just like you've said, you say, are you crazy? I'm not giving you a penny right now. You're not ready for that. That's what we would say would be like the typical kind of wiser thing to do. But that our narrator has just, Father says nothing. We don't even hear him talk. It's because that's not the point of the story. That's not where the story is headed. And it's going to show how this fella has shot himself in the foot and messed himself up. Now, of course, all of this is in the context of this whole chapter. And there are three stories: story of the lost sheep, story of the lost coin, the story of the lost boy. And the reason Jesus tells these three stories is because the Pharisees are grumbling. They're saying this man receives sinners and eats with them. So he's done two things bad. He receives sinners, he welcomes sinners, and not only does he welcome them, he eats with them. And table fellowship was a big deal. If you're a foodie, if you're a person who loves food and loves making food, the book of Luke is for you, because the Gospel of Luke, just about every single chapter, there's food. Jesus is either going to a feast, coming forth from a feast, or he's at a feast, or something about food is there, every single chapter. And it doesn't fail to be here. And here these guys are upset because he's eating with sinners, which to them was like unbelievable, because they believed that, these people would be defiled. And so that would defile you. And so because they, ceremonial defilement was really big problem for them. They didn't want that. They wanted to stay pure. And so they avoided people to stay pure. And Jesus didn't. Okay, so the young guy goes like crashing down, and finally he's in the school of hard knocks, and he comes to himself. Which is kind of funny, because it's almost like he walks by and sees himself sitting in the pig pen. He came to himself. Hey, what are you doing over there? Like he woke up, And so it's interesting what he says. Let me read the text. He says, I will arise, and this is verse 18. I will arise and go to my father. I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I'm no longer to be worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. What do you make of this speech?
On the outset, it appears that, in the short narrative that we have of him, he has kind of come around, not only just to like what his desires are. He knows food is available there, so that's where he ought to be. But he also makes a note that he has sinned before heaven and his dad. So there's maybe some type of spiritual maturity that has happened there as well.
Yeah, if you look at the other two stories, you'll find that there's a reference always to repentance. The word repentance does not appear in this story. It's not told to us. It's shown to us. It's not characterization by telling, but by showing. He's showing a repentant spirit that he messed up. What does he propose?
Just let me be a slave.
Why not a son?
Well, he says, I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. That's interesting. But at the same time, I was thinking that both in the first and second speeches, I still see a little a little too much control, maybe. Like he still has a plan. Like he had a plan in the beginning when he told his father what to do, and then even now going back to his father, he's not looking for a solution from his father or just waiting to see how he might be received or anything. He comes up with a plan himself. He proposes something.
Mm. Yeah, I know. If you think about this, if you got yourself in the situation he was in, would you go home?
It depends
Well,
on how you know your parents to be, I guess.
For most people, it would just be too humiliating. They would be like, I will work my fingers to the bone before I go back and grovel.
Mhm.
I mean, he kind of already done that though. I mean, he was starving in a pig pen. I feel like he'd pretty much worked his fingers to the bone.
Yeah, where else is there to go? But you can see how humiliating that would be to come back. And he comes back, and he's actually showing his repentance by not asking to be a son. He's like, the best I can hope for, the very best I can hope for is to be a servant. Now notice these two, that where this has come from and where it's headed. First of all, he begins the story with, Nick, you said it, he wishes his father was dead. This could be characterized as a son without a father. The son has all the cards. Son without a father. Now he's shot himself in the foot. He's messed his life up. And so now what he's going to propose, which is the best he can propose, he dare not ask for more. Now what he's going to suggest is a father without a son. Right? Make me like one of your hired servants. That's the best he can hope for. So his own failure has brought a situation that's just the reverse of what he was on top and now he's below. And now he recognizes that. He said, well, how many of my father's servants? I used to be above them. How many of them have bread to spare? And here I am starving to death. He realizes how low he's gone. But he's going to arise and go to his father. So what happens when he gets home?
Okay, if I can interject real quick here with a comment from YouTube, from one of our viewers who says that he finds his value in his actions rather than his father's love, which is quite profound. He understands his value to be arising from his actions rather than from the love of his father.
Mm. Yes. I will say that what can I say? I think he gets surprised when he comes home. Everybody is surprised when he comes home. And I think probably his his proposal to be a servant is based out of humility, maybe not a misunderstanding of his father's love, but of a recognition that he doesn't deserve it. But sure, we could argue about that. But thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Just like in the recognition of the father's love, I don't know if, like, at least in my version, in verse 21, he doesn't get through his whole speech.
That is correct.
It's like he doesn't even get to finish it. So at least for me, when I'm reading the story and I'm hearing it play out in my head, it's like he starts talking and the dad just completely cuts him off and is just like ignoring him and saying, all right, come on, bring the robes, bring the food. Like just cuts him off mid-sentence.
Yeah. Now I take textual criticism. That's a real fun class too. There is a textual variant there where it adds it back in, but the better text is that it is not included. Well, actually, the textual data is kind of divided, but yeah, it's usually the textual scholars feel that exactly what you have said is the right reading. His father cuts him off, and his father restores to him all of the markers of sonship, right? The robe, the ring, the shoes, the big feast, right? And the father's mantra is, "This my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." And they began to celebrate. What a story! Sounds like a good place to end it, doesn't it?
If only.
Why doesn't the story end there?
To
It wouldn't-
teach the right lesson to the Pharisees.
Mostly, Kyun. So, what do you mean by that?
Probably, yeah, this character is probably more similar, or like it's an analogy to Pharisees.
Analogy to the Pharisees. Okay. So, how does the older brother respond?
Like what I would have respond.
Now, you're the older sister. I happen to know your younger sister. And why did you say that though? What do you mean by that?
I mean, yeah, the son made a mistake and like basically did everything. Like, I mean, as another sibling, you probably will want your dad to punish or have at least a day of punishment. Without like just like a feast right after. Like it's kind of like telling you, okay guys, you can do that whenever and I will just bring you back in the same every time. So that could be like a spoiling process. I don't know.
Ooh.
Yeah, I mean, I get this because it kind of feels like the father is rewarding his bad behavior,
Yeah, rewarding.
or at least not punishing it, right?
That's what the older brother says, isn't it? He says, yeah, he's like, all these years I've served you. I mean, when they're celebrating, where is the older brother?
In the field.
He's working. He's working, and nobody tells him. He comes home, and there's a big party, and he's like, "What's going on?" I don't know if you've ever been in this situation. You're like, "What are they doing?" Well, your brother's coming. They're having a party for him. What? You can imagine how this guy feels. He's angry. Why is he angry?
Because he felt like it's unfair.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not fair. It's not just. I worked hard. I got nothing. He did terrible things, and he gets the big party. In fact, he always seems to get the parties. Right? Yeah, the party's in the far country. Now he gets the party here too. It's not right. But it's pretty impeccable logic, wouldn't you say? What's wrong with this logic? Is there anything wrong with it?
Yeah.
Oh. What is it?
But I don't think that he's necessarily wrong about he's not necessarily wrong about like the father's reaction to the younger son being like ridiculous and not making sense and what is going on here. But I think that the element where he misses it is that he assumed all along that parties and celebrations and enjoying life weren't available to him before. That's where his logic, he was wrong about what his father was offering to him. And that then made him think that his father was being unjust in celebrating for the younger son.
Yeah, it is kind of surprising that both sons talk about servanthood or slavery. The younger son says, make me a servant. And the older son says, that's what I've been all along. I've been slaving away for you, and I never got anything.
I
Yeah.
think I would also add that I see a similarity between the two sons in the fact that none of them seems to understand the father's love for either of them. And in this specific case, at the end, with the older son, it seems that he has an understanding of love as conditional, based on what you do. So if you deserve it, you receive the love, and if you don't, or the love, whatever comes with love, the benefits, I guess. And maybe I could also read another comment from one of our viewers. The older brother isn't a son. It's kind of along the lines of what you were saying. He's a worker. He views himself as a worker. If the younger son deserves to be a hired worker, the older son sees himself. If the older son deserves to be a hired worker, in his view, the older son sees himself as a worker. This, yeah.
He's a worker. Now, it's really interesting, this the discussion between the father and the older son. This is actually, I mean, the whole story has got these beautiful things. This whole reaction of the father to the younger son is so heartwarming. It's just so beautiful. You want an expression of love. This is love, where a father welcomes his son home. And you're all younger people and haven't probably had children yet, or maybe your children are very small. When you get older and you have kids, I'm telling you, you always worry about your kids. And when they mess themselves up, it's heartbreaking. But when they come and find redemption, it's heartwarming. So it's really interesting, the father's discussion with the older son. He says, so this is in verse 29. I like the look. Behold, it's in narrative. It is you see this in the Bible, and sometimes Bible translations drop that word. They shouldn't. The word look is an invitation to take a different perspective, a different point of view. So when he says look, he's saying, come over and see this the way I see it. All right, look, these many years I have served you, and I never, notice the word never, I never disobeyed your command, yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, spitting out the words, you killed the fattened calf for him. Just like Hyun said, it's not fair, right? And he said to him, son. Now the Greek word is teknon, which is a word meaning child. It's a term of endearment. He's kind of destroyed the brother's whole argument in one word, son. He says, son, you are always with me. Now notice how the son said never, and he says always. And all that I have is yours. You're always with me, and all that is mine is yours. Don't worry that I'm going to split the property again and give part to your younger brother. Right? It was fitting to celebrate and be glad. For this, your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found. So the first scene has this picture of a son without a father. He comes home proposing a father without a son. But the father forgives him and says, no, you're my son. We have a father and a son. The older brother proposes a father and a brother, but without a son. You know, I'm a slave. I've been slaving away from you. And the father says, no, you're my son, and everything that I have is yours. But if you are my son, that man inside is your brother. So the two sons project different, shall we say, different futures or different views of life. The younger son suggesting that he doesn't belong anymore, and the father's love taking him in and including him. The older brother sees himself excluded. The father includes him as well. The interesting thing is, though, this story has an open ending. Did the older brother go inside? We aren't told. Why did Jesus leave the ending open?
Because it was an invitation for his audience to make a decision. And if I can just add another comment that speaks about the parallel between the two sons, it says, again from YouTube, it says the younger son insults the father at the beginning of the story, and the older insults him here as he reneges the duties of the older son in hosting a party. So they both insult the father, but in different ways.
Well, and I mean, I think it's even more than just like an insult, because it's like, at the beginning, like what the younger son says is basically, I wish you were dead so that I could get the inheritance. But like at the end, the older son has missed the point all along that the inheritance was divided right then. Like at the beginning of the story, it says that the father divided it amongst them. Like at that very point, the older son got his inheritance as well. But it's like the older son has been living all of these years almost as if I can't wait for the old man to die so that I can finally enjoy my inheritance. So it's like both of them were actually wanting the father to die. They didn't want the father, they wanted the inheritance.
Now, what's interesting in the last part of this story is that the father responds to the older brother's arguments point for point. In other words, he takes seriously the objections of the older son, which means that Jesus took seriously the Pharisees. He was reaching out to them with this story. He was saying, but we had to celebrate. The sinner has come home. Don't you want to come inside and celebrate too? So it's beautiful for its appeal. I mean, of course, it's a story of sibling rivalry that seems to be timeless and always is true. Siblings fighting with each other. But the amazing story is the way that the father recreates a family that the brothers seem to be destroying. And it's his love that does that. Well, there you go, Adelina.
I'm Dr. Shepard. I'm looking at the time. It's 7:57, and I feel like we just started this conversation. I'm like, can we just like spend another 4 hours looking at more Bible texts and more passages? But the way you've helped us unpack this one is beautiful, especially with the emphasis on this open ending as an invitation, really. And I think when we see this story, we like to see ourselves as
The brother.
as well as the hero, the main character or whatever. but I think in many ways this applies to us as well, and especially this emphasis on work that Christians, and I want to say maybe especially Seventh-day Adventists, sometimes we place so much emphasis on work, on that we really can identify much more with the son who is working in the field and who has a hard time accepting that, well, other people have a share of the inheritance by means of just the grace of the father, really. Even though
hard time celebrating the grace.
Right. Or even understanding it, because maybe that's why he's not celebrating, because he doesn't understand it. But maybe he doesn't understand it because he hasn't experienced it himself, right? Because I'm sure the father if he's a gracious father, he's gracious with everyone. He's not partial. But somehow the son has not had this experience with him, even though he lived with his father his whole life. He hasn't seen that aspect.
Can I add something to that? I think that when I was looking at verse 29, it's interesting that he goes to a young goat instead of using the fatted calf, which is the one that's being used here, which is what he's really frustrated about. He's like, look, you didn't even give me a little goat. And so I wonder then if it's not only his misunderstanding of who the father is, but kind of like what you were saying, potentially that affects who he thinks he is. He's only worthy of a young goat here for all the work that he's done. Can you even just give me this little thing? But that's not the case. He's saying, look, all that I have is yours. And so there's a misunderstanding of who his value in the father's eyes, and just the relationship between the father and son as well.
But that's the thing. Like he's like the younger son. They both see themselves as worthy of love, based on their actions or based on their, they see their worth and they expect their father to react to either of them based on what they do. And the father shows both of them that that's not how it works. You cannot do anything to make me love you more or less, really.
And it's funny because it doesn't really show that either of them had it fully click for them. We don't know for sure if the younger son, like, oh, I finally get grace, but he was getting it anyway. So that's also encouraging for me as an Adventist. I feel like oftentimes we get stuck in our, okay, law of God's important. There's these things I need. I think it's even though grace is a reality, I feel like sometimes we have a hard time embracing it. But the beautiful thing is, well, even if you have a hard time embracing it, I'm still giving you grace. Yeah, and that's encouraging to me.
So in that sense, the father is also patient with them. Like he's not pressuring them. He's giving them an opportunity to understand who he is and his character, but without pressuring them. He has a lot of patience with both of them, really, waiting for them to understand, to grasp the truth, and then respond to that in their own time.
What I appreciate is that the father draws both of these boys in, no matter what they've done. And everybody talks about what the younger son has done in the story. The younger son talks about it, the father talks about it, and the older brother talks about it. And every time they talk about it, it's always negative. He was lost, he was found, he was dead, he's alive. I've sinned against heaven and against you. He wasted your money with prostitutes. They know that what he did was really, really bad. See, that maybe was one of the issues that the Pharisees had. How could somebody who was really, really bad be accepted by God? And that, I think, is still a struggle for many people. We've all made mistakes in our lives. Some have made bigger mistakes, but we've all made mistakes. And there's always that issue of now, so if I've done this and if I've done this many times now, how can I really be forgiven? And the repentance is part of it, certainly. But if there wasn't God's grace, the repentance wouldn't do anything. There has to be a rope for you to grab onto when the boat goes by and they're throwing you a lifeline. There has to be a boat there. You can grab onto it. If the boat didn't come by, it doesn't matter how much you were trying to grab, you would be lost. So God's grace is there even in our deep errors and mistakes that we make. It's wonderful.
I love it. I think, Kian, do you have anything to say right now? Okay, so maybe I think we could probably transition to just sharing a conclusion, each one of us, from this story as it relates to God as love. How do you see the love of God in this story, and how does that inspire you to become more loving? How does that inspire you to understand the love in a deeper way? And then after we do the takeaways, I'll give the word back to you, Dr. Shepherd.
I think my takeaway would be that I can never understand the depths of the love that God have, but what I can do is, like, through scriptures, like the practice that we did today, through scripture we can like grasp some of the perspective of love from God. And like, it's very, even though it's like a story that was a long time ago, but it's still like a story about human and how the relationship with each other and family and everything. And I just could understand a little bit more through the story, through the scripture, a little bit about God's love and his grace. So probably this is what I'm supposed to go do when I have time, like going through the scripture and start to know a little bit more about what is God's love.
Well, going off of Kyun's summary there too, I think it's fascinating that neither of the brothers, at least at some point or another, fully grasped it. And maybe the ending kind of rings empty to some degree because it's still happening in the story. That the reaction is kind of this, the potential reaction is the end of the story potentially. And so it is for us here, for me reading it here now too. And so the idea that it's just so much more then I can consider. And as I resonate with sometimes the younger brother and sometimes the older brother, the father stays the same for both, and his desire is for both. And so it just kind of like Hyun said, just keeping that focus as I read, looking for that understanding of that knowledge of God that is correct, that puts the servant role aside and embraces that sonship is so important.
For me, at the beginning of our conversation, I said the cross. We always talk about it being the place where God's love is shown, but it can also be kind of sticky because it's like we always talk, the justice of God, the wrath of God, and I'm like, that can be a thing that might even make people stumble over. Like, this is God's love, and I would say that you were talking about there's two ways to tell something. You can describe it or you can show it, and as we were reading through, the story of the lost son, it showed me kind of an answer to that question that I posed at the beginning, even if it didn't say it outright. And the thing that it kind of was showing me was that in this story, the father figure is Jesus. Like, Jesus is equating himself with the father. And it made me think about the cross. And so often, even though I've heard this before, so often it's easy for me to think about like God is the one hiding his face from Jesus. God is the one, who's satisfying, like the demands of justice or whatever. But I don't know. Sometimes it's like, it's so easy to forget. Well, actually, the place that God is most visible in the story of the cross is on the cross. God isn't the one hiding his face so much as God is the one on the cross. And I don't know. It changes the story for me when I realize, well, the Father is actually Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very profound. So you see here with you see the grace aspect really in this story. Well, on the cross you see more of the justice aspect and how the two of them really are two facets of the same thing.
But I mean, like, it's not even just like the justice, because it's like when I look at the fact that Jesus is on the cross, but he's God, like he's the Father. Like, and I don't make such a stark distinction between Jesus and God. Like, sometimes we separate them as if Jesus isn't God on the cross.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm like, no, Jesus is God on the cross, then it's simultaneously justice, but at the exact same time, it's just like, it's the same grace that we were just seeing in Luke 15. And like, that's the thing that makes it such a beautiful story to me, is like when that really strikes home to me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. For me, I guess I would just share first a comment from YouTube again. I believe that we have a lot to learn today about embracing sinner or sinners like Jesus did. So absolutely. And I would add to that by embracing sinners, I think that also includes ourselves. Right? So embracing others and seeing them the way God sees it, but also seeing ourselves as the way God sees us. And to me, I think the most baffling part of this discussion tonight was realizing that the older brother was at home with the father the whole time and did not know the father. So he spent his entire life in the company of the father, and he saw himself as a worker, as a slave. He did not understand his position and his status. And because of that, it was much easier for him to judge his brother and his father. And so I see this important connection in this story between understanding who God is and then that translating into our lives, into grace for others, because we understand his grace and love, and much less judgment for others and even for ourselves, really. Just giving us the opportunity to see people, ourselves included, from the perspective of God, as children of God, which is absolutely amazing that we human beings can be called children of God. And what that means is a whole nother thing to unpack, probably for after the discussion. But we are not slaves. We're children of a father who loves us unconditionally, no matter what we do. And so, Dr. Shepherd, I guess I really don't feel like finishing this conversation, but time is up. And so I just wanted to say a big thank you for showing us from the Bible, from the details of the text, how they portray God as love. If we took time to study every passage of the Bible, there is so much to learn. There is so much in every text of the Bible. There's so much to learn about God And I think the love of God transpires, as you showed us in this story, not only from the explicit statements, but also from so many passages that if we take time to dig into them, we will find them. We will find the value in relation to this concept. And so I would just take a moment to introduce the next guest. On Thursday, Ty Gibson will join us from Oregon, I believe. And he will be discussing about God as love in the Bible, kind of taking more of a broad picture approach. And so we invite you to join us then as well. Every conversation is an incredible blessing, and it helps us just see different facets, really, from different perspectives of the Bible. So I really appreciate your time, Dr. Shepherd, and your expertise. I wish we had a series just on narrative analysis, so we could go through so many stories and see how the Bible portrays God. But thank you so much for being with us this evening. And so I would give the word back to you, and I would invite you to share some of your heart-to-heart words for our viewers on this concept of God as love.
Love is transformative. We see this in this story. This story of the prodigal son, to me, revolves around like three ideas. The first idea is right and wrong. That everybody knows everybody knows there's something wrong done by this younger son, and he doesn't deserve any help from the family anymore. He's repentant, and that's certainly important, but that's not the key to his restoration. The key to his restoration is his father and what his father does for him. And it's really pretty overwhelming. You notice he doesn't say anything else. He's just, this is all surrounding him, and it's just like, this is unbelievable that his father would do this for him who had done such a terrible thing. And that, I think, is very encouraging. That there's no, as Corrie ten Boom said long ago, there is no pit so deep, but God is deeper still. That you can mess up your life really bad, but God does not give up on you. If you will turn back to him, he will welcome you home. And we as Christians, that's our role too, is to be the hands and the feet of Jesus, to do what the Father did, to welcome people home, to invite them in, even those who are hard like the older brother, and say, won't you come inside? There's a nice, time together. And I think in particularly in Western society these days, in my own country, there's a lot of tensions of people, and the pandemic hasn't helped it at all. And we need this kind of healing love, this kind of healing experience. It doesn't reject that which is right and wrong. It doesn't. It overcomes it and draws people back together. So that's my final word.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Shepherd. Thank you, Kian. Thank you, Nicola. Thank you, Mark. And a big thank you to our viewers as well. I know you have been blessed by this conversation, so we appreciate you being a part of the discussion. Also, thank you for your comments. And we hope you join us next time for another discussion with Ty Gibson about God's love in the Bible. Until then, God bless you.